Which didn't like the title. All right, hello folks, how's everybody? Today I'm talking about Secretary Azar and his likely complicity with the early spread of the coronavirus, as well as his essentially malfeasance now in participating in the Republican coup, in that many of them, is it 90% of congressional Republicans refuse to acknowledge the results of the election, refuse to acknowledge that Joe Biden won, and are also ignoring the outcome of over 46 different court cases in which Donald Trump's putative efforts to have the court system overturn the election results has resulted in 46 losses, and one victory in which a curing period for votes that were discarded was reduced from 9 days to 6 days. That's the single court victory that Trump lawyers have managed to produce so far. Everywhere else, judges have decisively laughed them out of court for lack of evidence, credible witnesses, or anything useful to support their fabricated narrative of election fraud, which appears to be just part of winding up the Trump base for a number of reasons. Adding to the coffers of Donald Trump. I didn't really realize this to start off with, but apparently once you raise money after an election, you're no longer abiding by campaign finance laws because the campaign is finished. So you're just fundraising for whatever you feel like. So Trump can put that money from his supporters straight in his pockets. He can pay for biscuits with it. He can pay off his personal debts, etc. And he's raised over $200 million since the election. So let's look, because I found an update now of a government report in relation to a whistleblower from the Department of Health and Human Services that reported on what happened when the first batch of Americans were repatriated from China. So they were delivered to two different air bases, Travis Air Base and March Air Base in California. And Secretary for Labor Azar promised on the various Sunday chat shows that he himself would be conducting an investigation into what had happened. So let's have a look. This is a report from April the 24th. And I've been saying for a long time, we need to see the follow-up. But this is the first time I've actually managed to find a relevant piece of reporting. So the government review was out on Friday, so at some point in late April, sheds light on early missteps of the administration in repatriating the first Americans from coronavirus-struck Wuhan, China, on January the 29th. So the sentence I found the most fascinating from this was, according to multiple interviewees, ACF, the Administration for Children and Families, also directed HHS personnel to remove PPE to avoid bad optics. Finally, according to multiple eyewitness accounts, the CDC lead at March repeatedly interacted closely with evacuees without donning appropriate PPE. So that's a problem. That's a problem that on the 29th of January, and we know that, yes, medical knowledge around COVID-19 was evolving, but they still understood that it was a unfolding disease situation, but that there were the PPE that they did have, they were asked to remove to prevent bad optics. I think that line from the report really highlights the disadvantages of living under what is essentially a fascist government, is that they govern for optics. Fascism is a form of democracy in which a substantial number of people are emotionally manipulated to put all their trust and support in a charismatic leader who promises to solve all their problems, who governs via emotional manipulation of populism, but also has to include the element of cruelty, that a fascist leader is someone who recognizes that human beings have the capacity to get really excited about the exercise of cruelty as a defensive strategy against perceived enemies, and that a great way to weaponize gullibility is to tell people repeatedly and at length that there are certain enemies that exist. It works really well if you have some people who are very immersed in grievance culture and just imagine themselves to be persecuted, or imagine certain stigmatized groups to be secretly working to undermine them. So we've seen that in Germany, where Jewish people were vilified as being agents of destruction and chaos in Germany. And that sentiment wasn't originally widespread amongst the German public, but it had enough of a hold in enough of the population, so that then when compounded by intimidation and massive propaganda, people were originally coerced to go along, but then it became something you couldn't oppose because you'd potentially be jailed for opposing the fascist leaders or attacked. And you might think, well, I could potentially benefit from embracing their ideology, because fascists also don't respect laws and don't respect constraints. Thank you. I will. Hello, Carl. Yes, I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot of Americans have died recently, and it hasn't been necessary. America is the world's wealthiest country overall and has substantial resources to respond to pandemics. Nevertheless, as is the case also with Sweden, but to a more extreme degree, citizens have been thrown under the bus of willful neglect. And I say willful and purposeful because, as far as I understand it, and I think this is sound analysis, Trump purposefully downplayed the pandemic, discouraged people from wearing masks, told people that it was a new democratic hoax, and hoped to benefit from cheating by dividing the electorate into people who listen to Donald Trump's advice and people who disregard Donald Trump's advice, so that you have people who listen to Trump that the pandemic's not serious and that they don't have to take any precautions, and those people dominate in person on the day voting in an election because they don't feel the need to avoid crowds. They don't believe the pandemic is real. They're not afraid of super spreader events. They believe the pandemic to be just like the flu, or just like a cold, or just something that doesn't exist altogether, and essentially be something that will affect potentially other people, potentially Black American people, but not them, not their families, not their communities. And if it does infect anybody or affect anybody, they believe that's part of an appropriate thinning of the herd, because they've been conditioned to embrace social Darwinism, i.e. the idea that when people die, it's great, part of an evolutionary process that involves letting the weak people in your herd die off. So when Trump advisors like Scott Atlas say, yes, we could try the herd immunity approach, what they're really saying is thinning the herd is sometimes embraced as a good technique. It is, if you're a sociopath and you've watched the movie Sparta too many times and you don't understand that Spartan civilization was overthrown because actually failure to have a strong social compact and social contract within your society is actually not a recipe for strength. You can see on the surface why some people might be able to derive an algorithm and say, yes, that works out. If you leave the weak on the snowy hillsides to die, you'll only get strong warriors and your society will be strong. But people actually like to know that if they work hard, exert themselves, sacrifice and behave to a degree altruistically when they're in their prime, that in their declining years, they will be protected and looked after. That's how you have a social compact. That's how people exert themselves on the promise of a cycle of caring for people when they're very young and caring for them again when they're old. That people who have the vitality and the ability to earn wages and exert themselves on the behalf of others as well as themselves, they can carry a society, but that the promise is still you will look after the tiny vulnerable people and the elderly vulnerable people. And right now, society is failing at looking at the elderly vulnerable people because Trump has brainwashed so many people into thinking that it's a good thing to let your elderly vulnerable people die, and that you shouldn't wear masks, you shouldn't be required to inconvenience yourself in any way to protect your society, your community, your family, yourself, which is not the best thing. So I was making a point that, to my understanding, Trump separated voters into people who voted on the day, that they would skew for Trump because they wouldn't be that concerned about the coronavirus, and then people who don't pay attention to Trump and who listen to doctors and scientists and researchers that the COVID virus is a problem, and they were more inclined to vote by mail and avoid crowds and avoid person-to-person contact because they understand that the virus is a problem. And Trump's hope was, having promoted disinformation about the pandemic, he could then benefit from having mail-in votes skew COVID realists and COVID denialists in person on the day voting to skew for Trump. That he could just say in person on the day votes can be counted first. My Republican co-conspirators can organize that at a state level. We'll count those votes first and then say, we're done counting, we're done. And we'll delay the mail-in votes. But enough people saw through that ruse, and enough people became concerned that the integrity of mail-in ballots was compromised in a chronological sense, that Louis DeJoy had been appointed to purposefully and willfully sabotage the mail and delay the delivery of ballots from mail-in votes to electoral offices. And so some Americans turned to in-person early voting, and some Americans turned still to in-person on-the-day voting, even though they weren't Trump supporters. So Trump's hope to so heavily skew in-person voting for Trump didn't quite work out because of the publicity and discussion around what he had done to mail-in votes. So that's my theory of how Trump has personally contributed to the massive escalation of cases of COVID in the US, which is contributing to many hospital systems around the US being on the brink of collapse. And that's a problem. It's a problem for anybody who needs medical care, not just people who require ICU beds with severe cases of COVID, but anybody who requires an intensive care unit bed or medical treatment for any reason. So people might think elective surgery just means cosmetic surgery, stuff which is frivolous, but it doesn't. Elective surgery means anything that doesn't kill you tomorrow. So you could have cancer that needs to be removed, but it'll only kill you in a year's time perhaps, so it becomes elective surgery. You might be in incredible pain and you need your hip replacement. It was scheduled to occur, it's been cancelled, it's elective surgery. So there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering. There's going to be a lot of loneliness from pregnant women who can't give birth in the company of a partner, or pregnant women experiencing complications who can't get an ICU bed because there isn't one available. There are so many people whose lives will be put in jeopardy as a consequence of Trump's purposeful facilitation of viral spread around the United States. Hi, Jeff, and hi, Kim. Nice to see you both. So yes, American hospital systems, we hear medical professionals tell us on Twitter over and over again that they are getting weary. It is hard for them to maintain professionalism when so many of their patients continue to be angry with them for even suggesting that COVID is real and that they potentially have COVID. They insist it's a hoax, that protective equipment should not be worn, maybe they have lung cancer, or they just continue to attend rallies such as the Georgia super spreader event that Trump held yesterday. So indeed, happy Sunday, everyone. People were watching Trump's rally, and yes, it sounded like a man insistent on brainwashing his audience to falsely believe that he had won the election. And anybody who's monitoring Parler, the right-wing Twitter alternative that doesn't censor your speech if you promote sedition or civil war, just if you say something rude about one of the conservative celebrities on Parler, that a lot of people are acting very radicalized on Parler right now. A lot of people are talking about how the various methods they want to use to kill various Republicans who are not bowing to Trump's wishes to overturn the election. Now, Trump isn't being particularly secretive about this. He's tweeting out that Brian Kemp should cancel the results of the Georgian election. Trump is telling his followers that he won Georgia. He's saying he won the election. He's talking in a fabricated sense about his amazing victory. He's essentially inciting violence. Some people would call it scripted violence, where you put out the call for violence, but you don't know what time or what place people who listen to you receptively will act on those instructions. It's true, Australia did it right. It had the benefits of a certain degree of geographical isolation because Australia is an island. But it also had the benefit of a relatively compliant ideology or psychology amongst the population. Australians comply. We had a shutdown in the state of Victoria. People stayed home. It was acceptable for officials to enforce that lockdown. And we had some elements of Americanism in that Rupert Murdoch, who's Australian originally, became an American citizen and then polluted the minds of millions of Americans through his brainwashing media outlet, Fox News. He has a media platform in Australia. He has a news channel called Sky News, which right now is saying, we don't really know who won the election because, it's the Australian arm of American propaganda, pro-Trump, pro-fascist propaganda, and they're making a lot of money right now online of all of the millions of loose people around the world who are essentially pro-Trump, QAnon, crazy people who are running really hard away from the emotional pain of the reality that Trump lost the election. And that's not to dismiss that those people are capable of violence. And I believe that that's what Trump is working towards, scripting enough violence for his followers that America will essentially find itself in a hostage situation where prosecutors, attorney generals, new appointees to a Biden administration will be hesitant to prosecute Trump because every step forward in prosecuting Trump or his family members or his close associates results in more innocent dead people from the actions of activated, radicalized pro-Trump extremists who are right now announcing their murderous feelings and intentions on the internet. Yes, Trump is levering Trump supporter angst to create anger and distrust, and as well as solicit money from his deluded supporters. Well put. Sheldon's here. Hello, Sheldon. Yes, Trump has withdrawn US troops from Somalia, and reportedly his new appointees to the Pentagon have given expensive government contracts to Eric Prince. For people who don't know, Eric Prince is the former CEO of Blackwater, that security organization that was paid to operate in Iraq, that basically committed war crimes against Iraqi soldiers and Iraqi citizens. People with hoods on and electrical wires attached to them, people snapped at by dogs, prisoners prisoners forced to lie on each other in a pile and stripped naked, all manner of horrific crimes associated with Blackwater. That's Eric Prince. He's also Betsy DeVos's brother. So they're the heirs to the Amway fortune. They're very powerful, wealthy, unprincipled, and I might say sociopathically devoted to the idea that their thoughts and deeds are superior and that they should be in a position of power over everybody else and never held to account. So Trump has almost raised enough money to pay his bills. Well, do we know how much he owed from his campaign? So there's various iterations of Trump debt. The debt the Trump campaign accrued with cities, with places where he ran up bills. And then there's raising enough money to get rid of his personal debt. I believe he owes Deutsche Bank, is it nearly $500 million? I think overall he's $1 billion in debt. But the Deutsche Bank loan matures. He's personally guaranteed that loan, which means they could seize his properties to get relief on that loan. Hello, Alan. Nice to see you. All right. So just for anybody who wasn't here before, I found an article published in Milwaukee, cbs58.com. Now, I hadn't seen this reported on anywhere else, but it was from April the 24th, reporting on a review conducted of government operations in California when the first batch of Americans repatriated from Wuhan, China, occurred on the 29th of January. So they said, yep, they did not have adequate training or protective gear. That yes, it was a rapidly evolving response, but this sentence is damning. According to multiple interviewees, ACF, the Administration for Children and Families, so this is still a part of the Trump administration, directed HHS personnel to remove PPE to avoid bad optics. So that's extraordinary. They had the PPE, that you can't claim ignorance, or you can't claim, well, we didn't know that PPE was necessary, because they had the protective equipment. They were instructed to remove it to prevent bad optics. So I said that really highlights that fascism is very, very dangerous for people. I'll show you the article again. Just if you want to have a look at it yourself and see what you conclude. So here is the headline: US government review of first Wuhan repatriation, says safety protocols not followed. I'd never seen reporting on this elsewhere. I hadn't seen a big deal made out of it, but this sentence is really important. Food distributors at the Mart airbase were not wearing protective equipment and at times were within 6 feet of repatriated individuals. You can see how that might have just been a mistake. They didn't know about that it was airborne. They might have suspected that. We certainly know Trump was telling Bob Woodward on tape on the 7th of February that the disease was airborne. But on the 29th of January, okay, so there wasn't distance kept and no protective equipment. But initially, no procedures were in place at March to ensure uniform infection control and infection prevention measures. But the sentence that says, oh my gosh, baby wipes and construction worker style paper dust masks, like you would buy at Home Depot, were given to them. We were so pissed, said the source, who was deployed to Travis Air Force Base to greet Americans returning home from China and Japan. But still, even when they didn't know, they knew enough to have some protective equipment, and multiple interviewees for this review brought about as a consequence of a brave whistleblower bringing up the problems, that HHS personnel were directed by staff from the Administration for Children and Families were instructed to remove PPE to avoid bad optics. Well, we need to call Alex Azar to account for that. So Chris Wallace today on Fox was trying to challenge Azar to use the correct terminology of President-elect Joe Biden instead of just calling him Vice President. And Alex Azar ignored him because that's what they do. That's what Trump's methodology is: push to get away with as much as you can. And they continue to undermine the legitimacy of the election results by pretending it didn't happen. So having done that serious thing, we might go to something comical, because I think effective ways of fighting fascism at the moment involve a three-pronged approach. The court system holding up, and people's consciences in the courts, and Republican officials who are governing elections, and the weight of that history of America, its pride as being a functional democracy. So that's holding out within the court system, and enough states have certified their results to at least give Joe Biden that 270 base of electoral college votes. So conscience and weight of history, so that even some Republican officials are apparently withstanding all kinds of pressure from Trump tweeting about them, calling them, trying to persuade them to do the right thing by Trump and just change the results of the election for him, to try and organize for either the results not to be certified, so he hasn't succeeded there so far, to have yet more recounts in Georgia. They've already had 2, and Biden has won the recounts. Biden has won all the recounts and added to his total in each instance. But the other prong is humor, that perhaps by laughing at people, by that becoming a cultural moment of laughing at the people who support Trump and who are attending the hearings, the pro-Trump hearings, and just showing the world the ludicrousness of the people who Rudy Giuliani is trying to produce as witnesses. So let's have a little look. Here is Melissa Carone, who you've probably seen, and I've learnt now that my 8-year-old son is very enthralled by watching adults behave badly. And when people pay attention to something, it's usually because it's an outlier. Psychologists prove that with babies, that they increase the rate of non-nutritive sucking on their dummies when they're surprised by something. So if you put a sensor in a baby's dummy and monitor it, if they can prove that babies anticipate the laws of gravity working as normal, because if they put in some invisible perspex so that a ball should appear to fall off a visible platform but doesn't, because there's some perspex there, the babies will suck harder, like what? I was expecting that ball to fall. The same principle applies to us paying attention to outliers. When we expect people to behave responsibly in a hearing and they behave nonsensically, we pay attention. When an 8-year-old sees adults behaving ridiculously, it's apparently really funny to them as well. Whoops. Anyway, my son saw this and thought it was hilarious. 22 million people have watched it now, so tell me if you have as well. It's birthed 1,000 satirical recreations as well.
The poll book is completely off.
Okay, so just for context again, this is the Michigan hearings in which Rudy Giuliani is sitting next to her. Oh, let me just check. Can you see? I'll make it bigger. Make the sound up. And we'll check the comments just to see what people are saying. Yes, these are all valid points about Azar. He did try and warn Trump that it was a problem. But once Trump decided not to make it a problem, all of the complicit Republicans have just gone along with that. Okay, let's pretend that COVID is not a problem. Oh, SNL used it for the cold open. That's great. Yes, and Alex Azar also was instrumental in allowing Jeffrey Epstein to have a sentence for his oldest victim. Only one victim was involved in the sentencing and the charges. And Jeffrey Epstein was able to spend every day on work placement at his office and go sleep in the private wing of a private jail and have people accompany him in suits, detectives dressed in suits, calling Jeffrey Epstein Sir when he was supposed to be serving a prison sentence. Yes, remove protective equipment to avoid bad optics. That was the killer sentence from that reporting. Very rare reporting. Haven't seen it reported anywhere else. I'll put that article there so people can just see the how to look it up if they want to do that. And in the interim, I'm pressing play on Melissa.
Completely off.
Off
That
by 30,000?
I'd say that poll book is off by over 100,000.
And
That poll book. Why don't you look at the registered voters on there? How many registered voters are on there? Do you even know the answer to that?
No, I guess I'm trying to get to the bottom of this here.
Zero. There's zero.
So my question then is if the
Guess how many? Wait, what about the turnout rate? 120%.
Let's let
Rudy's
Representative
turn.
Johnson ask his question.
so the poll book number, okay, there's two things that could happen here. Either the poll book number, if ballots were counted multiple times, there's two options. Option number one is that the poll book numbers are not going to match.
They don't.
The actual. Not by thousands and thousands of votes. That's not what we see right now.
Take a look
option
again.
Number one.
Take a look again.
Option number two is that they essentially were filling in names of people who didn't vote.
Dead people too?
So is that?
Let's
I guess,
let
is that
Representative
your suggestion?
Johnson ask his question, and then when
I
he's
thought that
done,
was his answer. Okay.
Well, I guess that's
well,
my question here is why we're not seeing the poll book off by 30,000 votes. That's not the case.
What did you guys do? Take it and do something crazy to it?
I'm just saying the numbers are not off by 30,000 votes. So
I know what
are you
I
saying
saw.
that they're filling in?
I know what I saw, and I signed something saying that if I'm wrong, I can go to prison. Did you?
okay,
I'm just trying to ask you a legitimate question here.
Yeah, let's let Representative Johnson ask his question, and then don't interrupt him, and then if you want to respond to it, that's fine. Did you have more, Representative?
Yeah, I guess I just want to keep following back up with the poll book. So are we saying that the poll book is either wildly off or that they are filling in names?
It's wildly off, and dead people voted, and illegals voted.
Okay.
So that's my answer.
I think
Okay, so hands up. Who's heard the update from Melissa Carone, which is that the Daily Beast reported she was recently finished her parole term, her probation term, because her phone was detected as being involved in the sending of sex tapes of herself and her boyfriend having sex to her boyfriend's ex-wife over a period of 2 years. So essentially using a wire carriage service to harass her boyfriend's ex-wife. He probably participated in that as well because he's now claiming that, yes, in fact, he was the only person who sent them. But Melissa Carone had already confessed to detectives that, yes, she did that. But they also initially tried to pin it on the ex-wife and say that, well, the ex-wife must have somehow illegally hacked into the ex-husband's internet Google photo storage system to send herself videos of his new partner, Melissa Carone, and himself having sex. So they tried to frame the ex-wife for cyber crimes of hacking when they themselves spent 2 years harassing this woman with by sending her sex tapes of themselves having sex, and that she was just off probation for that when she was hired as an IT temporary worker that was for a company that then was used by Dominion so that she could be a temporary worker there and then become involved in this hysterical testimony I mean, I say hysterical, but you can't just laugh because they're endangering people's lives by contributing to this rigmarole of this farce of pretending that the election results should be overturned, which is radicalizing people who are already close to the edge of sanity. They're radicalizing the radicals and making them more likely to commit acts of violence out of rage that Donald Trump's expert witnesses aren't being listened to and that Donald Trump's rights are being trampled on by the court system. So we can enjoy this moment of laughter, but at the same time, just really hope that people in the FBI are monitoring Parler and taking note of the people who are threatening to kill Republican elected officials and also just take to the streets and kill liberals in angry response to President Trump's election victory being overturned by the results of the election. Sheldon's saying that there's some worldwide communication issues happening now due to what's ECM? It's not electromagnetic flares. What's that one? So I have been able to find video of the SNL cold open, which was, as people have said, an inevitability because Cecily Strong already was on people's minds after Melissa Carone's performance.
Okay, well, today I have brought before you a dozen highly intelligent, barely intoxicated individuals who are all eyewitnesses. This election was stolen from the American people with a level of trickery not seen since Houdini. That wasn't me, that was you guys.
It's only going to be little clips of it.
Because I personally saw hundreds, if not thousands, of dead people vote.
You saw them?
Yeah, basically, yes. I remember because I was walking out and they were walking in. And then they gave their votes to Democrats. And then you probably did something crazy with them, didn't you?
I don't handle ballots, and I'm a Republican.
All right. Well, that was exciting. What's everybody else's perspective at the moment? Have you seen on Twitter the reporting about Parler things, or are you trying to avoid that because it's kind of depressing? It is a little bit depressing. All right. I'll play you something else. I don't have any sophisticated analysis for you today other than I'm concerned still about Trump's attempted coup and about Republican complicity with that.
Tell me why.
It is very important, and I celebrate it every time I see someone acknowledge that it's not a cowardice or lack of spines on the part of Republicans. They are actively gambling with their fingers crossed that Trump can pull this off. So they won't necessarily say that Trump won the election. Washington Post contacted all of the congressional Republicans. 25 of them said they conceded that Biden had won. Many more of them, 90% of them, were entirely silent. And two of them actively said that Trump won. So that's where we're at. I think a lot of Republicans who've benefited from Trump's ability, as many fascists have, to corral amazing levels of enthusiasm and support. And the degree to which we've seen the endurance of that enthusiasm and support, even with mass death and mass unemployment, is quite extraordinary, and evidence again of the hold that fascist emotional manipulation gains on building on people's existing weaknesses. And in this case, their weaknesses were the belief in Republican fairy tales. The fairy tale that less government is somehow better. The fairy tale that more guns and more widely prevalent guns is better, whereas at an individual level, it increases the likelihood that someone in your home will shoot themselves or shoot another member of the family. So it increases your danger if you have a gun in your home. And that's apparently regardless of storage methods. Just that your level of likelihood to be murdered or commit suicide will increase with guns in your home. And what other fictions do Republicans circulate? Oh yes, they circulate that the Republican core principles center around independence and fiscal prudence, when actuality we can now see more that it centers around reluctance to help Americans in a crisis, that they are keen to withhold relief packages from the American people during a time of unprecedented crisis, that it is Republicans such as Mitch McConnell who are failing to come to the table with any more checks for Americans who are currently, many of them, undergoing severe financial hardship and are on the precipice of financial ruin and indeed homelessness. And that 1 in 6 American adults with children, I believe, reports not having enough food to eat. So Joe Biden goes online and says, yes, look, my father brought me up to say, you should try and solve your problems, not the government. But many people now are really hurting. It's not their fault and they should have help. And the left go, oh, how dare Joe Biden try and promote that Republican canard of you should solve your own problems. Joe's trying to meet that moderate center in the middle and say, yes, you don't want government to create dependency. It's important to acknowledge that there are ways in which you can seek to solve your own problems. Government is not the answer to every problem. Personal attributes and grit and determination, they are real things. They're not just a fabricated explanation to hide the oppression of Black Americans. The excessive devotion to the principles of grit and pulling yourself up by your bootstrap, the excessive talking about it, yes, that to a degree is a function of trying to sell fiction to American people that there is no persistent harm and no persistent deprivation of economic opportunity inflicted on Black Americans by systemic racism at an institutional level as well as at an individual level by people who want to relitigate the Civil War, who want to fight it and make slavery more of a thing, who want to make a confirmed hierarchy of superiority more acknowledged. They want to be free, to be able to use the N-word. They don't think it's fair that they should have constraints on their liberty. They don't think it's fair that they should be asked to wear a mask to protect communities from a disease that does disproportionately impact Black Americans. But Biden reached out to that middle ground. He gets attacked from the far left, and obviously the far right still denounce him as illegitimate. Right now in the US, there is no stock left of ammo for public purchase. Yes, Parler is spelled P-A-R-L-E-R. So all of the stock is sold out. But yes, it means too many people are psyching themselves up for some type of civil war. It's to be hoped that conditions do not continue to trend in that direction. All right, this is a comedian. I find her amusing. I hope you do as well.
Tell me why I haven't met everyone who's voting. How do you justify the turnout rate then? $1 million? Sounds a little high to me. If all the votes were counted, then how come I didn't vote? There's so many, you see, telling me dead people voted? You telling me my dad voted? My dad can't vote because he's dead. Or at least that's how we used to run things. Let me ask you a question. How many fingers am I holding up? Nope, too late. The answer is 0. Why don't you take a look at the registered voters on the book? Why don't you see who the author is? Well, I'll tell you what, look at the book again. Look at the book again, because I drew a little penis in it. I'll tell you why the poll book numbers don't match, because you do something funny with it. I know what you guys do. You take a book in the hot tub, and you're like, let's read it in the hot tub. Then it's soaked. Look, we've all done it. The difference is, I'm not the president. Not yet. I don't know about you, but I signed a little paper that said I wanted to go to prison. I'm drinking Baileys. It's Christmas. Riddle me this. If a man were drinking Baileys, would I give him? Rudy, let's kiss. You tell me why I haven't met everyone.
So her name
How do you...
is Kylie Brakeman. She's great. And I accidentally let my son watch that, and he watched it about 40 times. He loved it. Probably because she mentioned that she drew a penis in the poll book. Whoops. But my son's very politically engaged now. So I learned something. Today. Still healing to laugh, because the sad thing about dealing with a coup is that it's stressful and that it can wear you down. Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Sheldon. And you too, Jack. She's very good. She definitely plays up the drunken aspect of Melissa Carone's testimony, and I think it's important to celebrate the ridiculousness of that particular woman, because it creates a cultural moment. It increases awareness of how entirely confected Trump's position is, how entirely ludicrous his position is, that he's the legitimate winner. And we're still asking ourselves the question, is he just doing this to continue to fundraise, or is he just throwing shit at the wall, or does he actually have plans for a military uprising in which he can appoint enough people to the Pentagon and fire enough military generals that he could have a crack at that? I feel that there's enough acceptance in America of rules and law and electoral results, and that there's enough pride in having a functional democracy amongst the military and amongst the American population that would not succeed. But I don't see that much reason to be entirely confident on that topic. Yes, the court system is holding, that's great, but I think the hostage situation is growing in that, because the Robert Mercer-owned parlor is really proving to be this haven for people to egg each other on in increasingly radicalized terms. Lynn Wood, who's I think no longer officially employed by Trump, but is out there advocating for Trump to begin martial law and to demand that people overturn the results of the election. At the Trump rally in Georgia, the crowd were chanting, "Fight for Trump." And so David Perdue, had to walk away from the microphone. He couldn't be heard over the crowd chanting in an intimidating way. They were telling him what he's doing wasn't enough. He took the microphone and was trying really hard to just say, let me just say how much I support Trump and how much I want him to have success in his endeavors. I want him to be able to overturn the results of the election. Don't blame me for it. But the crowd clearly did. Now, it's clearly, when we look at it dispassionately, in the Republicans' interest to keep sustaining the delusion that Trump really won the election and that will be validated by the court system at some point, or Republican officials at some level of state government will be able to interfere with the raft of electors they send to Congress. There will be some spanner in the works that will derail the path of President-elect Joe Biden to the White House, and that Trump will magically get to stay in power. And it doesn't have to be magic. It can just be unadulterated authoritarianism. It's not as if that's a playbook that Trump isn't intimately familiar with. We already know he's familiarized himself for years with Hitler's speeches from My New Order, a book of Hitler's collected speeches. Trump's admitted to owning it. His first wife said he kept it by his bed and that he read it frequently. And the Vanity Fair journalist, let me find out her name, because it would be good to tell the story with a name to it. Vanity Fair. Marie Brenner. Okay, so Marie Brenner, when did she originally publish the story? 25 years ago, before 2015. So 1990. Okay, story published by Marie Brenner in 1990 detailed Trump's engagement with Hitler's speeches. I can show you the story if you like. Let's do it. Kim doesn't think that he'll get enough faithless electors, so proud mama's boys assemble. I love it, Kim. Proud mama's boys. Nice. So this is the 2015 Vanity Fair story that revisited the 1990 story. So this was how the 1990 story appeared in press at the time. It said, unfortunately for Donald and Ivana Trump, all that glittered wasn't gold. Donald Trump's Midas touch may be tarnished, but the banks are still throwing money at him while Ivana is busy brokering a future on her own. Marie Brenner reports on how the Trumps are still going for it all. So if you scroll down to point 4, let's see. Point 4 is, when pressed on awkward topics such as whether or not he regularly read Adolf Hitler's speeches, he turns skittish and perhaps inventive. So last April, Ivana Trump told her lawyer, Michael Kennedy, that from time to time her husband reads a book of Hitler's collected speeches, My New Order, which he keeps in a cabinet by his bed. Hitler's speeches from his earliest days up through the phony war of 1939 reveal his ability as a master propagandist. Now listen, this is reporting on what Marie Brenner asked Trump. Did your cousin John give you the Hitler speeches? I asked Trump. Trump hesitated. Who told you that? I don't remember, I said. Actually, it was my friend Marty Davis from Paramount who gave me a copy of Mein Kampf, and he's a Jew. I did give him a book about Hitler, Marty Davis said, but it was My New Order, Hitler's speeches, not Mein Kampf. I thought he would find it interesting. I am his friend, but I'm not Jewish. Later, Trump returned to the subject. If I had these speeches, and I'm not saying that I do, I would never read them. So fairly standard Trump line there, but at least you have an original admission that he said, my friend Marty Davis gave them to me. So he knew. He admitted to having a book of Hitler's works in his possession, but justified it by pretending that his friend was Jewish. Marty Davis is not Jewish. And it's not a crime. Oh, yes, I'm sort of saying Azar is complicit with Trump's promotion of mass death in the United States. You're about to come up to some mass level hospital dysfunction and overwhelm across multiple states in the United States. Doctors are telling us this. There's going to be something you need to familiarize yourself with called secondary deaths and also rationing of care. Rationing of care when they have to decide, okay, anybody under a certain cutoff age, so anybody over a certain cutoff age can't get treated. That's what happens when you have overwhelmed medical systems. Doctors are starting to say they're almost at the point now where they want to start imposing criteria of if you have traveled, if you haven't worn a mask, they would prefer to deny you health care. Wouldn't that be great if everybody had to sign a pledge saying, if I pledge to wear a mask so that I can receive medical care at any point that I require it in the future? Because if you don't sign it, you might be a factor in denial of medical care to you. And you wouldn't have to phrase it as they've willingly exposed themselves to endangering their own health. Because I can imagine if you start down that road, yes, making overweight people sign something saying, I promise I won't overeat and put myself in danger, or I promise I won't smoke a cigarette. No, if you put it as, I wear a mask, so I am not going to actively endanger the health of medical professionals, maybe we could get some traction with that. People behave better when their own behavior is put under the microscope. and they don't feel like they're part of a gang that are all luxuriating in the empowerment of rule defiance. So yes, I'm not suggesting that 30,000 dead people is equivalent to the millions and millions of people who died because of Hitler and his collaborators' actions, but the same level of disregard for human life is at play when you start killing your own citizens, because it serves your agenda and it helps you avoid legal consequences for your crimes. Tyrants will do anything to advance totalitarianism. Yes, syncopates is a word I'm not familiar with, Sheldon, so I'll write it down. I'm also writing down the phrase, proud mama's boys. Because comedy is still a way that we build solidarity and consensus. It's not making fun of people just by calling them names. It's making fun of their position. I saw, if you've seen footage of Proud Boys' initiation ceremony, you will have seen that the new recruit had to swear something along the lines of, I am a proud Western chauvinist, I'm proud to be white, white people built civilization, something like that. And then they all get to punch him and they get to keep punching him until he can think of 3 different types of cereal and say that out loud. So risible, but clearly male bonding over taking pride in a civilization that they didn't personally build and that they're falsely claiming responsibility for. All right, folks. Well, I think I should go to bed, but yes, it would be great if some relief packages were potentially tied to vaccine use. I can see that being very complained about, but at the same time, what's America got to lose? There's going to be low vaccine compliance anyway. Apparently 50% of New York firefighters are saying they won't get the vaccine. How many more Americans have to die before enough people at least know someone personally who's died? Because that's extraordinary. New York suffered so much. There were sirens every day in the streets of New York in the March surge of the coronavirus. So how would firefighters not know about that? How would they not understand the degree to which coronavirus can lay waste to a population and overwhelm a hospital system? But it shows that, I guess, firefighters are demographically quite likely to belong to that group of white, non-college educated voters that strongly support Donald Trump. And when you belong to that in-group, you look to your fascist leader for guidance, and he manipulates you emotionally, tells you that Democrats are the enemies of pride in America, that they're trying to undermine America, that they're trying to kill babies, blah, blah, blah. They'll say anything to wind up your feelings. They're not constrained by truth. That's why fascists are quite hard to oust once they get into power and they gain access to even bigger megaphones, which is why I'm still very proud of America for voting out a fascist, even within the constraints of a dumbass electoral college system, which privileges and grants affirmative action power to the votes of white, non-college educated people who are often more dominant in populations that have disproportionate effects on the electoral college system. Yes, it's called liberty, the liberty to die, like the liberty to have guns even if you're a felon or a domestic violence perpetrator, the freedom to die in the streets, the freedom to overwhelm hospital systems, the freedom to see teachers disproportionately die, medical professionals, actually it's more likely to be medical professionals, nursing home assistants, nurses, doctors, to disproportionately suffer and die. They didn't sign up to sacrifice for your irresponsibility. And we here frequently denounce communists. We also decry your tendency to over-exaggerate the threat of communism. I'm sympathetic to viewing Bernie Sanders as a little bit of a covert communist, but he didn't win the election. He didn't win the primary elections, and he didn't win the presidential election. That was Joe Biden, who certainly isn't a communist. Neither is Kamala Harris. They want to help people. Yes. Oh, and Alan, I really have to get to it. I know you took notes. You watched a program about deprogramming people who've been brainwashed to join a cult. I do seem more rested. I had a better night's sleep last night, which was critical because, look, the coup has been keeping me awake. I find it hard to switch off when I'm scared about what will happen next. Yes, my freedom to swing my fist ends around near your face, because I don't have the right to swing my fist right near your face either, because it's still intimidating you and threatening you and putting you in danger if I accidentally trip as well while I'm punching. So I don't know that Joe has to change the message that much. I think he's shown very strong intuitive genius for invigorating parts of the voting electorate. He's helped bring people into the fold by pointing out that in power, he will try and advocate for workers, in contrast to the Republican Party, which puts worker rights in jeopardy in favor of the vested interests of people who own corporations. Pumpkin, you might be overplaying the role of Antifa. I grant you that many Antifa folk are fairly irritating little anarchists who appreciate that there's a problem with climate change that hasn't been adequately responded to by various governments because of the significant obstacles of powerful vested interests who derive a lot of profit from fossil fuels and didn't want to in any way allow popular opinion or government action to support the phasing out of fossil fuel use and thereby preserve more human lives and preserve more elements of human civilization. Antifa are often people who feel really agitated about that, but I don't agree with them that anarchy or communism is the answer. They often talk about overthrowing capitalism. They're just the noisy, crazy people. They're far less armed with weapons than your noisy, crazy people on the right, which are QAnon, which grow in number every day and delusionally subscribe to beliefs that the world is run by a coalition of Hollywood stars who are baby eaters and, very, very much derived from the age-old canard against Jewish people. The Jewish people ate babies. That was how various pogroms happened across Europe in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance and all periods of history, really. People have massacred Jewish communities because a lot of the Jewish religion does center around differentiating Jews from people around them. All of the kosher rules say basically keep separate. Don't eat with other people. That's why it's so complicated to eat kosher if you're a Jewish person. So there's a pattern of distinctness. It makes it easy for other people. I don't want victim blame, but other people over time have taken advantage of that distinctness to say, look at those people, they're a bit different. Let's all surrender to our human impulses to hurt other people in defense of our own interests. Let's really rev them up and pretend that our interests are being threatened by these people who look different. And let's just succumb to those dark, destructive impulses, that nihilism, that thanatos, as Freud put it, the urge to kill and destroy. And let's kill and destroy some Jewish people. So that same impulse is being harnessed by QAnon and Trump supporters to target people. When you say Antifa, you're talking about George Soros, aren't you? The dude who happens to be Jewish. So we know what's fueling you and what's fueling people like you. It's just destructiveness. And there's a bit of that on the far left as well. Won't deny it, won't endorse it either. I'm happy to condemn it and disassociate myself from it, be it on the far left or the side of the horseshoe on the far right. Horseshoe theory. Okay, Sippy can't help but troll. Imagine if your candidate lost the election and all of your worldviews were really lame and dysfunctional. You would then just try and make yourself happy by going online and being a contrarian in public, because you want to validate your worldview. You don't want to accept that the political party you supported, the president you supported, are essentially responsible for mass death and mass loss of jobs and livelihood, which is a situation that is going to escalate sharply in the next month or so as well. And that's my only other reason for at least saying maybe they won't do a coup, is that they don't want to be left holding the puppy. What's the expression? They don't want to be left holding the bucket, holding the baby. That's what it is. They don't want to be left holding a baby that's pooped its diaper. And Trump and the Republicans' coronavirus response has been massively involved in making that baby poop its diaper substantially. Mitch McConnell's still sabotaging relief efforts even now. He wants that diaper to be really super duper poopy and for it to be in Biden's hands, and Biden's got to change that nappy. Luckily, Biden at least has some experience in changing Republican poopy baby diapers, because Republicans also pooped their pants with the 2008 American economy. Similar things, not a ignored pandemic, but massive tax cuts for the wealthy donor class of people, leaving the middle and the lower classes to increasingly shoulder a larger proportion of the tax burden that maintains American infrastructure, which enables businesses to prosper in the first place. Lots of Trump supporters want to kill Jews. Did you miss the Pittsburgh massacre, where the Tree of Life synagogue was attacked by a Trump supporter with an automatic weapon who, how many Jewish people did he kill? Let's find out. Tree of Life massacre. $11 dead and 6 injured in Pittsburgh. So, I mean, maybe you're not familiar with the sharp rise in hate crimes against Black Americans, against Jewish Americans, that occurs in every county that's had a Trump rally. Yes, the far right are much more violent and much more armed with weapons. The far left are more just really annoying online and not very organized. I mean, if you think about it, anarchists are inherently badly organized. Not to say that communists over time haven't managed to gain access to the reins of government and then abuse that power to kill millions and millions of people. So yes, we won't underplay the potential ability of the far left to mass murder people when they gain access to power. Oh, that was in your city. Yes, that would have been terrible. I'm so sorry, Molly. Oh, good. You posted the article on brainwashing in my Discord folder for everybody to read. Good. I should let more people join the Discord folder. Molly, if you want to join the Discord group, message me on Twitter and I'll add you to it too. Drew wishes moderators wouldn't mute people. We need to see what these people are saying. I know, but if they're just saying that, that's not really a person contributing to a conversation, is it? I mean, it's perfectly wonderful to mute those people. Oh, Alan, I promised to let you know Jeff has apparently been muted a few times, and he's a very long-standing member of the community. I think his screen name is Jeppers. He gets kicked off Twitter periodically and has to get a new account. But yes, Jeppers, don't mute him. He's one of us. He's one of us. So now we can find out what those people are saying. Just put the word parlor into a Twitter search engine and you'll find some people reporting on what's being said on Parler and they take screenshots, and it's far worse than even the trolls that we get here. They've got more room to type, and they type out a lot of death threats. You're welcome. Jeff has muted you too. All right, well, let's not have a muting society amongst friends. Yes, we're not here to debate trolls. Trolls have lots of forums to give vent to their scripted violence rhetoric. Here we are more supporting each other. This is more like a support group for the resistance. A few times, hopefully by mistake. All right, let's all behave and love one another. I'm very grateful to Alan for being one of my most staunch supporters for a very long time now. So yes, Jeff, please also don't mute Alan. Please don't do that. Guys. All right. You've been recently comparing political ideology and hypochondria. There are so many similarities. Yes, that's a very interesting analogy. I will write it down. As has been observed by other people, political conservatism often has a lot of roots in denialism of Black suffering and denialism of systematic oppression of Black Americans and denialism of the systematic reduction in economic opportunity. Group hug, that's a nice. Where he lives. Jeff, behave or you get muted. Don't say that. Group hug, yes, group hug. All right, hugs. There we go. That's better. That's better. All right. You found 295 acres in Massachusetts for $299,000. 199 acres. Okay, is that for me? Is that for a place for me to settle down? All right, pumpkins. I've shown you the humor of Melissa Cardone's satire. I haven't seen the SNL sketch myself because it's not available to me because I'm not in America. Sad. People are telling MAGA that they're cancelled with a hashtag. Oh, I found a good thing. Okay, I found Stacey Abrams. That is something I do want to share because, as I keep pointing out, she helps Georgia go blue. And she's the person who we really need to be looking to for advice on how to go forward with Georgia to have turnout for this election. She is the expert on Democratic turnout in Georgia. What does she have to say? She's got 5.9 million views, so good that people are listening. We will now join that number.
Hello, and thank you to the grassroots activists, the allied organizations, volunteers, and of course, all of you voters for your efforts over the years to create this new Georgia. I am so grateful for your contributions in making Georgia a pivotal battleground state. Vice President Biden now leads in the race for Georgia's 16 electoral college votes. Without your faith, this would not have been imaginable. And without your hard work, this would not have been possible. As we continue to make sure that every vote is counted and every voice is heard, our work is not done. In Georgia, we have 2 Senate runoff elections on January 5th. My friends Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock are on the ballot, and control of the United States Senate will likely come down to these 2 races. That means access to health care and access to justice are still on the line. Please go to gasenate.com and join our efforts to elect Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock to the United States Senate. That's gasenate.com. We have seen what's possible when we work hard and when we work together. We know we can win Georgia. Now let's get it done. Again.
All right, that's fantastic. We've been visiting the fairfight.com website for advice on where to donate or where to volunteer but that sounds like a new website as well. You're a bachelor for 2 weeks. You took Marcy to Rhode Island earlier today. Is she visiting someone? Yes, I don't think so. I was hoping that voter apathy might be high. There's certainly lots of dissension and anger against Republican Georgian state officials, but there's also Donald Trump's very capable of enthusing that base. So there's part of him, I mean, he just talked about himself at the rally, but that's who they turn out for. If he manages to put his own election campaign as if that's still on the ballot, and Trump voters and supporters turn all of their infuriation, all of their fury into energy to turn out, then that's a real problem. We have to make sure that the Democratic voters are similarly motivated. I mean, not out of loyalty for a charismatic fascist, but out of commitment to help the whole of America get relief, to not go underwater. And we have to remember that so few people actually understand anything about Republican obstructionism in Congress. Most people just hear over and over again, Congress has left. Congress has failed to pass a bill. Congress this, Congress that. Very, very, very few people in the media will ever make any reference to Mitch McConnell's activities in blocking all of the legislation that the House has passed and failing to bring it to the Senate floor. So 0.001% of the population probably knows that Mitch McConnell blocked the HEROES Act passed by the Democratic-controlled House in May of 2020. People don't know that Mitch McConnell is sabotaging the American economy to create more of a problem for Joe Biden to clean up, or to just create problems because he knows that the media will struggle to ever hold him accountable, because out of deference to balanced reporting, they'll always just say Congress did this. They'll never, ever, 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 really, 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 rarely, rarely ever once point out that Mitch McConnell is the key person blocking all of the legislation. She's visiting the grandkids. There you go. Yes, people project, and whatever we are, we project onto others. So those Trump voters who have some decency and projected onto Trump and then think Trump's a decent person who's just been maligned by the media and maligned by those nasty Democrats that they've been conditioned for decades upon decades to hate and distrust and fear and despise. Whatever element of decency remains in Republicans, it's to be hoped that some of that decency is activated by the fact that courts have rejected Trump's claims of voter fraud as being unsubstantiated and completely lacking in evidence and credibility. Turtle is even blocking the skinny stimulus. It's that they're working so hard to sabotage Biden, because it's not just that they hate Biden at this point. I presume there's strong motivations for Republicans to try and help Trump succeed with a coup, to make the American population so hungry and frustrated that they just put up with whatever Trump does to just get some resolution, to just have somebody be in power that they hope will fix things. I mean, Trump won't fix things, the Republican Party won't fix things, but a hungry population without income, without a roof over their heads, enough of those people might be so frustrated they can't pay any attention anymore to the results of a democratic election. They just want whoever will promise them things. Fascists will always promise them lots of things. So you have to have enough food, you have to have enough calories to be able to give your brain glucose to even function, to process information like, oh wait, having a fascist in power is not that good. Trump hasn't been that good with his promises yet. They'll just buy whatever a fascist says. Coronavirus, China's fault. Economic dysfunction, China's fault. Great things around the corner. Healthcare in 2 weeks. Plans coming. You'll all get healthcare. Food, coming soon. Jobs, relief money. Sure. We'll do that any day now. Maybe I'll put Trump's name on a check again. Could happen. Just keep voting for me until you're in a position where I can do whatever I like to you and you've got no option to do anything about it. So I challenge everybody to let one person who's not politically aware and not on Twitter to just interest them in Mitch McConnell's role in holding up relief. To say, did you know Mitch McConnell is stopping you from getting money? Or to even badger your Democratic representatives a bit more, to be clear and repetitive with their messaging that Republicans are holding up relief funds. And you don't just have to bow to them and say, well, we won't call them out too much because we don't want to be rude. Tell them, address the American people on what is blocking relief. Say it clearly and say it repeatedly, because people don't know. And you can't just run on the nice personalities of your candidates without explaining what is obstructing your legislation to deliver relief to the American people. Alan's making the point that you can support this broadcast if you, enjoy the content and support the host. This is the website where people sign up for as little as $2 a month, and for some people substantially more because they can and they want to. And for every single person that does support me in that way, my gratitude, my thanks, my appreciation. You lift my spirits in ways you don't know. Thank you for validating my output and giving me the strength and the confidence to keep coming back and doing it over and over again. Alan is campaigning to bring Dab and family to the USA. Yes, so that will incentivize you to help people vote in the Georgian election, because I'm more inclined to move to the US when you have a Senate that's at least 50-50 and so controlled by Democrats, when Vice President Kamala Harris can be a tie-breaking vote, and you can have the relief money you need to stop America from being plummeted into an even deeper, darker economic depression than it already is, and to help restore the soul of the United States and help restore the functionality of your hospital systems and help people from going under financially and therefore emotionally. Crime rates, domestic violence rates go up when people are thrust into poverty, because economic tension makes people tense, and tension makes vulnerable people closer to snapping. So yes, people need to take responsibility for their own actions, but putting people out of work without the ability to feed and support their families means more pregnant women will be assaulted by their stressed and aggressive partners. More children will go hungry and lose access to the medical care they need as a result of their parents losing their jobs. More families will break up, more people will die, more children will be abused. All of these are predictable, guaranteed outcomes associated with economic collapse. And Mitch McConnell is perfectly happy to bring about the collapse of the American economy. His donors will get to buy the repossessed houses of the middle class at cheap prices. They don't mind if they ruin the economy, because they are relaxed in the knowledge that the media will not appropriately hold them to account for causing the collapse. Yes, on Patreon, it's patreon.com/DavChat. That's correct. Thanks, Walter. 8 Mile Creek's been doing a lot of work to try and explain who's blocking the stimulus. Nag journalists on Twitter, they do sometimes read messages. I think that's one way we can target a little bit of our energies. Just a thought. Alan says, worth every dollar. Bless you. Molly's a member too and loves supporting my work. You lift me, and the act of your lifting me is lifting you back. I love it. And I'm grateful for $2 a month donations, because you might have A, need your money yourself, or B, have worthier causes to donate to, which is fine and very commendable. Honest voices in the media are good, I recommend Greg Sargent. He writes for the Washington Post. He's very clear-eyed about the authoritarian nature of not only the Trump administration, but of the Republicans who are silent, who facilitate the rise of the illegal consolidation of the illegal and unconstitutional consolidation of executive power around Trump, and the attempts to illegally and anti-constitutionally overturn the results of the recent election. I think it's not all the one word. You go Patreon. I'll scroll up to see if I can see it. There it is. Okay, patreon.com/DavChat. That's how you do it. Alan is a very smart man. Yes, I appreciate his feedback, and I appreciate it when he tells me to go to bed and get some rest as well. Our Dav community is growing. Excellent. Love it. Bless your hearts, all of you. Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Take care, rest up. I'm going to type in Greg Sargent if you haven't seen it, because I just remember what happened to Daniel Dale when so many people on Twitter began to follow him and share his work. No, there isn't. Began to share his work. Oh, and I'll type in Washington Post as well. Washington Post. That's what he writes for. His column is excellent. Oh, his Twitter handle is probably called the Plum Line, I think. Daniel Dale is so shared and supported on Twitter that even though he was a Canadian reporter for the Toronto Star, he got headhunted by CNN and rose to national prominence for Americans, reporting and fact-checking on Trump. Most of the Republican senators who agree that Biden won are leaving the Senate. Yes, so it shows that it's a power play, doesn't it? That principle is so organized along lines of who's leaving can get a job in commerce or something somewhere, and who's hoping to stay on in government and benefit from Trump's illegitimate power grab. Oh, there's a light bulb out in the fake background. That's a fake background. That ain't my house. Oops. And that would be a ceiling speaker. Yes, we're at an actual house, which is not. So Twitter search the Plum Line. And Molly's place is available. We may need to have a bigger room. Imagine the parties we can have once the pandemic is under control and America is functioning under a normal civilized government. Imagine the meetups we could have. The ones not running for re-election won't say a word. I think a lot of the people who run for re-election support Trump because of the fervor and commitment of his base. So many Republicans support Trump, and we would like to believe that's not the case, but they live in an alternate reality. They don't engage with facts very much. Billionaires like Rupert Murdoch and Robert Mercer are purposefully funding disinformation channels, and Americans are suffering as a consequence because it creates a significant subset of the population that have no clue about what's going on. Everything they believe about reality is confected nonsense. Dancing, Alan can do his Trump impression. Everybody can have sushi for all. Jeff it's 2 blocks from the lake. Can anybody water ski? Not me. Somebody might be able to. Anyway, take care, everybody. Thanks so much for participating today. We can have a virtual party, blue screen of party gathering. Yes, we can have an online gathering that will enable us to get together across times and everything. Thanks, Kimchi. Thanks so much. Thanks, Molly. Mwah. Oh, it's you that does the impression. It amazes you. How can they believe this bunk? Imagine if you spent decades listening to Rush Limbaugh. That dude believes that women take a contraceptive pill every time they have sex. That's what he said on his show at one point. Maybe he's been disabused of that notion now. But at one time, that man with a vast national audience made that assertion, that women want more contraceptives so they can keep taking more pills for when they have sex. Good night, Sheldon. Yes, great seeing you today. I will go to bed so I can take good care of my family. Thank you, Craig. Oh, we've got the Hamilton DVD. Alex Azar is the Secretary of Labor, and he's very corrupt. Look it up. DVD, excellent. Oh, well, enjoy that, Jeff. Take care, everybody. All the best. Talk to you soon. Bye. Thanks for your support.